Hello, and welcome back. My name is Ash. So first I gotta say, your choice. Ignore the funny hat or not. I decided to wear it because I scratched my head. And now it's one of those things like, I'm all concerned it's the lighthouse. I'm insecure. So it's like, alright, the lighthouse effect. Everyone's gonna be staring at the scratch on my head. So instead I decided to put a side duck hat on my head. Side duck? I can't. So anyways, bought this at a thrift store. Believe it or not, it's my favorite fucking hat. I love this thing so much. Sorry. Getting a little distracted with my goofiness. That's okay. So today, we're talking about ego. And what I believe it truly is. So let's go by definition. Ego, according to Google, is the part of your mind that forms your sense of self, mediates between instincts, morals, and reality. Essentially, helps you say this is me / not me. Ego is the identity that navigates the world. Cool. So, however, from the spiritual side of the fence, it's a constructed identity built from memories, roles, beliefs, and survival patterns. However, notice I said constructed. So identity issue is we tend to identify or believe we are the ego. We're not. So, very two different definitions. One is the ego saying we are the ego. One says it's a construct. Something that was made. So what if the ego is a tool? We're so used to identifying as it that we didn't consider it as something else. Since we so closely identify as it, and we say that, ego is a tool. However, society is built around influencing the ego. Media content, like ads made to distort our ego, which then distorts our sense of self. Because we believe we're the ego, so then society influences the ego, messes us all up. That is the wrong direction. Come on, fingers. So at some point, in my spiritual journey, I actually believe a lot of us do this. It's normal. It's a normal part. We villainize the ego. I know I did. I've even watched a video on it describing that it's actually not the villain. Because we associate it, and it's like, well, if the ego is us, then it's also the part of us that's responsible for the bad stuff, essentially. Those dots don't really connect. But this was like my train of thinking. It's like, okay, so if the ego is the one that's inflated, like saying, the ego is the thing that's responsible, saying I'm more important than you, or me putting myself above you. If the ego is what's making me do that, then I was going to cut off the ego and say, okay, well, clearly it's toxic, it's bad, because it's making me think I'm better than other people. That's not the case. So then I heard of this thing called the ego death. So it's like, oh, okay, well, let's just effing kill it. Cut it off like a Genghis arm. What that is like your arm, Genghis green, it's a disease. Basically, you cut it off like an amputated limb, like something that's not usable anymore. You essentially just say, oh, I'm done with it, and you throw it away. Well, that's not how that works either. Turns out you're supposed to integrate it. What does integrate mean? It means make it a part of you. But here's the funny part, it already is. So we've identified the ego is a part of us for sure. And I heard it being addressed this way. So say you have your hand and you have your fingers, and then you were to cut off one of your fingers. Well, sure, I could still function, but now I'm down a finger. So I'm almost like not whole because I'm missing a finger. The ego is the same thing. If you cut off the ego, you're cutting off a part of yourself. So essentially, you're not whole anymore. Because the ego is not us, but it's a part of us. I believe the term was to reject, not the term, but the saying was to reject any part of oneself is to reject all self. Because I am as much this one part as I am the rest of me. The sum of the whole, or the sum of the parts is the whole. And you can't have the whole without the parts. Point being, the ego is necessary. So you don't treat it like the villain, you don't cut it off like it's a bad step-parent. you integrate it. But the ego death isn't simply killing it, it's integrating it. They call it an ego death because death is literally just the transition of one thing to another. So it dies because it becomes something new. It becomes a part of you. There's a way to actually detoxify it. You can actually turn it into a helpful tool. If you promote repairing it or healing it, because basically, let's put it this way. Apparently, that's not a common skill, I found out, but I would fragment myself. For instance, I seen it on an episode of Teen Titans. There was an episode when they went into one of the characters' minds, and she had different versions of herself, different colors, so like yellow, pink, green, red, and each one held a different emotion. So it's like essentially you take the ego and you section it off and say, okay, what is the ego? Well, the ego is a unhealed part of us. So since it's being attacked or influenced by social media and other things, it becomes toxic. Imagine a lake, and you get a new plant and they start pouring shit in the water. Over time, that lake becomes completely unlivable and it's toxic. Anything goes in, comes out, destroyed or infested. So there's a way to get the ego back to a appropriate, I don't know what's a term for it, but a good vibration. You get your energy to a better spot. And then the ego is actually a useful tool. However, let's go a little deeper. What I actually think it is it's a compass. It's specifically the scales of Ma'at. Ma'at. Am I saying that right? Ma'at. Which is the Egyptian scales. Supposedly, in the karmic cycle, when you die, your heart or your soul, your essence, gets weighed on this scale of good and evil. And if it's good, then it tips the scales. No, it's actually supposed to be balanced. I think it's supposed to be balanced. Because if it's too tipped in one direction, you got to go back and learn your lesson again. So if the scales balance out, then you're even, you're neutral, you're good, you've learned your lessons. However, I believe the ego is your own personal scale. I actually did write notes, but I'm not even really following them. Oh, okay. I believe it was meant as a tool to determine where our spiritual alignment was. So like, for instance, I would take a story or idea of myself, like some trauma about being unworthy, and I would compare it with my ego. I'd essentially take the story and separate it. Be like, okay, My ego is flaring up. I may have. Where am I going with this? It was coming out for a reason. Alright, let's say, for instance, something triggers me. And then I notice the reaction, which is the ego flaring up, either getting mad or feeling some kind of way because it got offended, or it got touched, triggered, irritated. And then, based off what emotion arises, it tells me a story. And then I take that story and I compare it with other memories. Like, say I was feeling unworthy. Well, right now in my current situation, let's say I feel unworthy, and I would actually be able to pull up memories of me saying or something happening when I felt unworthy. And then you take that memory and you study that, and you're like, well, hold on. Let's look at it objectively. What actually happened? This is the story I said. I failed a task. Let's put it this way. I use this story a lot. There was one time when I was with my dad. I don't remember what we were doing. We were out on the road, and I was a kid. He asked me to go in and get food. Well, food to a kid is candy. So I came out with like a Mike and Ike and a Dr. Pepper. And he instantly yelled at me and said, "This is not food. This is candy. What the hell were you thinking? Blah, 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 blah." So that scenario makes you feel unworthy. Like, I can't make decisions. I'm stupid. I don't know what I'm doing. But then you look at this story and it's like, well, no, hold on. Well, that was my dad just being a hothead. Honestly, he should have went in and just got it himself. Whatever the story is, the story is. It happened. But are you truly unworthy? Are these feelings matching up with the story? Now, the story made you feel that way. But if you actually look at the story and read it again, were you actually truly unworthy in that situation? Well, no. No, I was just a person who made a mistake. And then that actually heals some of the ego. It detoxifies it. Because it's like, well, okay. So that wound of feeling unworthy has now been addressed. Maybe it hasn't completely healed, but it's been addressed. I've noticed it. So then the ego kind of has to take a back seat and be like, okay. Hold on. But unfortunately, it's too quick to react. If the ego can actually take a back seat and do its job, the ego could be like, wait a minute. Okay, I know this to be true about myself. Because if you get it to a non-toxic spot, it will be like, okay, well, I'm confident in myself, and that doesn't have to be toxic. I believe in myself, and I love myself, and I now have a healthy ego. So I feel confident, and I love myself, but I don't love myself more than others. So now it's healthy. So now it's like, okay, say I had another reaction, and I weighed up against the ego. Now the ego is like, okay, this is how I feel about myself. That's all it is. It's just a mirror. It's a reflection. It's not you. It's just a reflected you. And then you use that as the tool. You use that version of you as a tool and say, okay, well, if this is what I define as myself, does this being held up to the mirror match? That's essentially what I'm doing. I'm using the ego as a reflective mirror. Here, okay, so here. So it's also tied into your heart. It's like the other half of your heart. It's like two sides of the same coin. Because the heart is the other part of your identity. It's how you feel. The ego dictates how you feel. Because we believe through the identity, I am supposed to feel this way. My ego says, I'm entitled. Let's go with that. I'm entitled. So I am supposed to feel this way. I am supposed to receive this. And so on and so forth. So then, when you don't get it, your feelings get hurt. Your heart hurts, and you're like, well, I don't understand. This is what I believe to be true, so why didn't it happen? And then you get upset. And then the ego gets triggered, and then you down spiral. And then this is when people tend to actually loop back into the ego. Instead of looking at the reflection, being like, okay, well, this is how I'm currently feeling, they just get mad or they feel the feelings, tuck it inside, and then just continue the cycle. And then the next time it pops back up and they're like, oh, why is this happening? Grr, and then they just go back. And then they repress it. They don't actually look at it. They just keep repeating it. So then the emotions get played off how you feel about yourself. So where is this going? Okay. The emotions are the weight, is how it feels. So there has been times where like my ego gets stripped and maybe I do feel superior, or maybe I have one of those triggers where it's like my sense of self is being tested and I feel like I'm so sorry, this actually made me lose my train of thought. Okay. So basically you listen to what the ego says, the words. Well, I shouldn't have to wait, I should blah, 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 I'm entitled. But then how you feel truly is the reflection. So when I say those words, say for instance, maybe I had a feeling in my chest, and it hurt. Well, that's the reflection. That's the truth under the ego. That's the actual part of you, not the ego. That emotion is the part of you that you need to listen to. So it's like, okay, well, my mouth is saying this, but my heart is feeling this. So then you take a closer look at the heart. You look at the emotions that the story triggers. Be like, okay, well, what do I feel right now? I feel unworthy. Is it true? Well, I don't know. Let's look at the story. Today I did this and I felt like I failed. I fucked up and something happened and now I'm triggered. And now it's reminding me I feel unworthy. Well, then the heart goes back and says, I'm sorry, I can feel myself losing it, so maybe this is the end of the episode. But it's, okay, get back on topic. All right, let's focus. Ground. So basically, making sure you step back from the ego is how you see the patterns, because it's a loop between your heart and your ego. And the energy that's looping between those two is the way to detoxify your ego. But you don't want to break the loop, because it's still there for a reason. That loop, like I said, gives you information. Because then after you detoxify it, now it's like, okay, well now it's getting easier to detoxify. And say, for instance, I have another scenario. My ego takes a hit when I ask people out. I get ghosted or I get rejected or there's a sense of self-worth. So my sense of self-worth takes a hit. The ego takes a hit. And I'm like, well, you know what? I didn't want her anyways. The ego says I didn't want that. But underneath, I'm like, I feel rejected, I feel hurt, I feel upset. That's the truth. That's the truth there. So then you heal that, and then you get those on the same page. And then the ego actually becomes healthy. And then it changes the story from, well, maybe this has nothing to do with you. Maybe it's not your fault. Maybe it's not your self-worth. Maybe it's not anything to do with you at all. So now the ego is actually being the mediator. And being like, whoa, hold on there, buddy. Hold on. This is not what the ego reflects. You are not worthless. Look back at it, come on. So you can actually build a healthy ego, and it actually can be a useful tool on how to grow as a human. So to revisit the point, we live in a society that teaches us we are the ego, and then it corrupts the ego and inflates it. Why? Well, if we don't know who we are, it's so much easier for someone else to tell us who we are. So the ego then gets told, well, I have to have these things to be okay. So they feed bad information into the ego, programming it and tricking it. So then we have to step back and be like, whoa, you're right, the ego is a part of me, but it is not me. Just like these thoughts. The thoughts in my head are not me. I have thoughts, I produce thoughts, but I am not the thoughts. It's almost developing the observer mode. And then realizing again, the ego is just a fragment of yourself. It's kind of like a puzzle. Essentially, I took myself and I broke myself into a puzzle. And I set down all the pieces and I looked up every single piece, one at a time. But instead of doing it alone, I took my ego and I held it up next to me. I almost use it like a monocle. I'm like, is this piece me? Nope. Does it? That's essentially what I did. Do another one? Okay. I'm gonna do another episode. You know what? We'll do it later. Wait for the scratch on my head. See? It's not all that bad. It's kind of obvious. Yeah. And it also looks like there's a lump on my head. Okay, we're gonna put the hat back on. That's it. We'll call it done. So, hopefully you got something from this. I don't believe the ego is inherently evil. I don't believe it's bad. I believe it's actually meant for us to do great good. Good stuff. Do good. Be good, ego. So, maybe I'll need to do a separate episode where it's actually explaining how to be a good ego or purify, I don't know. If I feel called to do it, I'll do it. I'll get onto it. Spirit's been clocking my ass. I've been having to do episodes. I have not been doing my YouTube videos like I should be. So, bumping them out, trying to get them done as we can. Had to use a different camera today, so things look a little different. I broke my other phone, so this is my... Wow, my car just auto-locked itself. Huh, okay. Anyways. We'll call it here. Y'all have a great day.